Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Encounter. I'm Jeff Kellam. I serve as the Parish Associate at the Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott, New York, in the Union District of Endicott. On this week's Encounter program, we're going to be talking about water. Now, we take water for granted. You know, you go to the grocery store, there's bottled water. Maybe you work at a workplace where there's a big jug of water, cold and fresh and refreshing. We have water at home. We use it for washing our hands, for bathing, for drinking, for cooking. It's there, and it's always there. Sometimes, because of our aging infrastructure around here, it turns a little bit brown, or they have to flush out some hydrants or something, but ordinarily, we got water. That's not true in other areas of the world. And because we consider so many folks our neighbors, whether they are right next door or around the world, because of the teachings of Jesus in Matthew 25, we have some degree of compassion and responsibility to help other folks have clean water too. So today, my guest is Joanne Tunison. She's working with Living Waters for the World, and we're going to be talking about this worldwide community of folks who are working to build clean, sustainable, pure water for folks in other parts of the world. Let me introduce you to my guest today, Joanne Tunison. We have just met, and we've been talking a little bit about her work with Living Waters for the World, which is an international organization working internationally to bring clean water to villages all over the world. And tell me, now you're from Elmira. Tell me about your church and a little bit of background about how you got involved in this project.
Thank you, and thank you for having me as a guest today and the opportunity to talk a little bit about Living Waters and the value behind the entire program. I am actually a member of the First Presbyterian Church of Elmira, where I've been a member for about 38 years. Our church is extremely mission-minded, and one of our mission projects, if you will, is participating in the installation of water filtration systems through Living Waters of the World. And in this particular case, it is co-sponsored by the Rotary Club of Canandaigua, New York.
So you have been on a number of mission trips, and most recently, tell me about that, the city in Mexico, or it's not a city, a village in Mexico. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. A little bit of background about the village itself, because this is fascinating that you have to serve as a translator.
Yes, I do. And if one were to talk to someone who is a native of Mexico and mention Taví, chances are good they're going to have no idea that it even exists, let alone where it is. It is in the state of Quintana Roo, which is also where is located Cancun, to give you some kind of idea of the geography. It's off a main highway, very high in the jungle, and really cut off from society, if you will. The nearest city, if you will, is about 10 kilometers from the highway. So you're talking, with the roads the way they are, a good 40 to 50 minute drive. And it's not an easy one. There are approximately 700 residents in the community. There are 3 churches. There is the Presbyterian Church, and that is the church with whom we are partnering to install this filtration system. There is, I believe, a Seventh-day Adventist church, and then there's some type of ecumenical church. We're not sure what that is. And those 2 churches that are not Presbyterian are in people's homes. There are 3 schools, a preschool, an elementary school, and a middle school. They do not enjoy the privilege of technology that we have stateside. And in fact, if a student would like to pursue his or her education following middle school, that student would have to leave the community and find a place to live and pay for the education. So they don't enjoy the free education that we have here.
So it's a very primitive community. They're in the jungle, and the water situation there. Tell me about that.
They are living what we here would call a primitive lifestyle. Many of the modern day conveniences that we take for granted, such as fresh drinking water, are not necessarily the rule of the day there. Water can go on and off at any time. It's not safe to drink by any standard. The water that they need for drinking, for cooking, for bathing must be brought in on a truck, and they're brought in 5-gallon plastic bottles called garrafones. To purchase one of those garrafones in the nearby city, when we were there, was going to be, I think, 12 pesos, which would be the equivalent of about $6 American. Once the water filtration system is set and going, the community will then have the purview to sell the water to the community members, and it becomes literally a business for them. Unfortunately, electricity comes and goes too, and so that will always wreak havoc with the system.
Now, you've been going down to Mexico on several occasions. This is not your first trip there to work on the water filtration system. And is it a well? I mean, do you build a well?
There's quite a process involved in this, and I actually just finished my training, and I am certified in what is called Living Water University 101, where I have been trained to put together a team, deal with all of the logistics of getting a team there, and the logistics of surveying properties to see if there is accessible water, to literally make sure there's a piece of property that's available. So in this case, and hopefully there'll be some pictures to accompany, it was a small parcel of land, and it literally was overgrown with jungle, boulders, very large boulders, and that was designated. That all has to be moved by hand. They do not have modern day equipment. They're Mayans, they're small of stature, and they're doing things by hand.
So there's not going to be a front loader coming in to help move rock and so on?
Well, at some juncture, there was a delivery, and I can imagine what the vehicle looked like. It wouldn't have been a great big, Ford 150, but it brought in some sand and it brought in some gravel, but the rest of it is going to be fairly done by hand.
When you first went down on this mission trip, it was sponsored by your presbytery?
In part, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and when was that? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh. The first time that I did the water, because we had been going for years before that, building churches in the Presbyterian and schools, a lot. And the water piece is relatively new for me. But again, it was co-sponsored by the Rotary in Canandaigua, or Newark, New York, New York, and the Rotary in Valladolid in Mexico.
So an international partnership.
Yes, international is right.
And in terms of the church, the same thing. And you've made so many trips, you said you couldn't count them. You don't know how many times you've been there.
I know I started going in 2012. Prior to that, I had taken students during my teaching tenure, on vacation types of tours, but with Presbytery since 2012, so however many years that
You're not moving rock and digging and doing the manual labor this time. Tell me about your primary role.
Much as I would like to be doing the physical work, my job is primarily translation, and the translation is what we have called educators. They will tell me in English what I need to say to the residents in Spanish, and then one or two of them will be charged with translating into Mayan, because that is the primary language of many of these smaller communities.
Yeah.
The education piece is pivotal to this entire piece, because these education individuals will teach the community the importance of water and the importance of making sure that water is used to preserve life. When you deal with communities such as these, literally there has to be instruction in the importance of washing hands, brushing teeth. They're very life skills that we take for granted, but when you don't have water, that becomes a challenge. So I'm predominantly with the educators once we get there. However, I can be going to this station, that station, whoever needs a translator. We'll have one or two other translators, but we never seem to have enough.
Right. And how many folks are working on the project in total?
This project, we have 15 who have committed fully. Other times we've had more, other times fewer. And they will be divided into 3 groups. Those who will be working on the building, those who will be working on the installation of the apparatus, those who are educating, and those whose responsibility will be just to be available if a need comes up. In this particular case, Jeff, one of the other wonderful benefits of this trip is when we were there in late August, I just literally came back to set up this with the woman, Linda Wirtz, who is responsible for putting this all together. We visited in a nearby city a college, and they have a program where they have a minor, or I think it's a minor, in English language. So we are borrowing some of those students, taking them up into the village to help with translation as well. They are required to do community service, so we are co-benefited by this relationship. So it gets bigger.
Yeah, community service is something that when you think of the wide community involved, with the students coming from a university setting, and even for them this is interesting to be in a primitive Mayan community and small village. And then you think of the folks coming from New York State to help with the project. It certainly is we find out who our neighbors are.
We do, and one of the most important outcomes of this or any other mission trip is building relationships. We truly build relationships, and honestly, when we first met this community, they were very reluctant. They didn't even conceive of having a water filtration system. It was not something that was in their knowledge base. Then when we presented it, it was one of those, oh, that'll never happen kind of deal. We spent 4 days, for an entire day, with these folks, getting to know them. We're all on a first name basis, and it didn't take long, but we had an ice-breaking activity where we asked each person to introduce self and just talk about what are your hopes, your fears, what do you expect. And every one of them at one point or another said, this is such a blessing. We never believed in our lifetime that we would see something like this in our community. And now we have 2 people in the community out of the 700 that we know of that have phones. 2. And cell service is not good. So the one who has the phone is going to be the one who connects us with some of these pictures that you're getting, who emails and lets us know the progress. So we're very comfortable now because we know who they are. We can put faces with names. And
do you keep in communication with these folks even while you're back home now?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every week, every Sunday, they send a communication to Linda Wirtz in Canandaigua with some photos of progress, and then Linda sends it out to the entire group who will be traveling in February.
So the project in, remind me of the name of the town?
Tabi.
The project is ongoing. It's not something that is underway while you're there, and then when you folks leave, they stop. This is something they're continuing to work on, and then you'll go back and tell me about your next trip.
Yes, there are actually components to the Living Water Covenant. They signed covenants. They're responsible from this past August until February 14th to get the foundation completely built and the housing piece, which would just be a simple cement dwelling, and making sure that everything is at the ready when we bring in all of the equipment for the water filtration system. So they will be at the ready based on what we've seen now, and once we get there, they have a team that will do nothing but the water filtration installation along with our team. Then the other team will be responsible for painting the building, windows, and so forth. So the physical construction. That should be completed and ready to roll by February 24th. And then we go back in a year or so, and I think we're required to go back at least 2 times. The covenant, I think, is 3 years. I could be mistaken about these numbers, but we always go back and we revisit.
Right. Our guest today on Encounter is Joanne Tunison, and we're talking about Living Waters of the World and its project in Mexico, a mission project. As you were growing up, did you think you were going to be a missionary, so to speak?
No, sir. Joanne grew up with great wealth and privilege. And Joanne had a little bit of an attitude of wealth and privilege. I grew up in a very wealthy community. And when I was 16, I went to Mexico for the first time as a Girl Scout. And we did a community service project up in the mountains in central Mexico, and it changed my life forever.
What an awakening that must have been.
It was an incredible awakening. I was able to discern at that point what I was going to do. At the time in my life, I was not having any kind of religious experience. I was just a typical 10th grader who loved to speak languages, so I knew with that trip that I would be doing something with Spanish, and I would be doing something to reach out. These many years later, between all my trips to Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Spain, Mexico, there have probably been 100 where I've done mission work, and it's just the calling that I got.
Yeah. And it's interesting to point out on this particular project that the folks who are going down are not all water filtration or water purification experts and chemists and engineers. These are folks who just have kind of a calling to go and help in some way.
Absolutely, yes. And this particular trip, many have been trained through Living Water University. Many of us took training this past April for a full week. And that was in the filtration system, which would be the 103 class. The 102, as I said before, is education, and 101 is the committee that puts the whole logistical piece together. Right. But we are volunteers. We pay the entire amount out of our pockets every time we go, which is typically with meals, air travel, lodging, vehicle rental. It comes in a little under $2,000, but that is completely out of pocket. So it is a calling, it is a dedication, and we don't even think about that piece of it.
Sure. But you do some fundraising.
Not for ourselves individually, but for the project, absolutely. We need to raise at the beginning of a project for Living Waters a sum of $25,000 needs to be raised right away. And with the help of co-sponsors such as Rotary, area churches, our synod, our presbytery, those numbers come in very quickly.
Yeah. Where is this project in terms of being paid for?
We're just about there, and in fact, we decided that they really needed to have a bathroom adjacent to the building, and that was an added expense, and so there was a last-minute call for any funding that could come in, and some of the churches threw in some extra, and so now they'll have their bathroom as well. Yeah. People, when they hear about it, are really generous.
Yep. When we had talked on the phone about this interview, you had mentioned the Matthew 25 invitation or initiative. Can you say a little bit more about that?
There are three components to the Matthew 25 initiative, and the one that's near and dear to our hearts is eradicating systemic poverty. We were talking with this group when we were there in August. The salary, they're a very cash poor community, very cash poor, and what they would make in a year is far below what we would call poverty. And we are called in Matthew 25, in the Gospel of Matthew, to minister to the least of these. And this is one of the ways we can make that happen. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just the installation of the water filtration system. You can build buildings, you can build vehicles. The most important connection of the entire mission is to build relationships, for people to know that they are not lost, they're not forgotten. They didn't know us from the person next door from New York State. Did they even know there was a New York State? No. So the building of the relationship is also very critical with respect to Matthew 25.
Yeah. And certainly, we've talked before about the relationship and the cultures coming together. It's fascinating. Remind me how many folks from New York State go down to work on the project at one time.
Well, this is a small.
And are you looking for other volunteers? I guess that's where I'm headed.
Okay. Well, this team is 15, and I believe we're fairly closed right now, but we're already underway looking at another location. But I would like to just go back quickly when you talk about the culture. When we put together our financial requirements, Linda Wirtz will send ahead money. The women of the village prepare our noon meals every day. And the food that we get it's not what you're going to get at Taco Bell or any of these other places. It is 100% Mayan. It's made lovingly with their hands.
Now tell me what Mayan food is like.
A lot of root vegetables.
Okay.
You'll have yams, you'll have potatoes, you'll have carrots. It's not a lot of meat. Meat is expensive, and they're not near anything that would allow for fish. So you're going to get the vegetables, you're going to get a lot of rice, you're going to get beans. It isn't what you would call spicy. Many people, when they hear Mexican, I don't like spicy food. That's a misnomer. You can have it spicy if you want to, but you don't have to. But they're dense carbs and what protein they can get. The beverages that we get are heavenly. They're freshly picked fruit that is squeezed. It could be Jamaica, any number of tropical fruits that they'll just squeeze fresh and you just drink it.
So when you're not working, and I'm thinking of evenings, what do you do together on site? And where do you stay?
We rent either villas or hotels, and just to give you some perspective, the villa where we will be staying, or the first hotel where we will be staying, which is the closest to Davi, is about $20 a night. It's ridiculously cheap. And there are some nice restaurants in and around. We try to have a meal together at night at a restaurant. we have our noon meal, which is usually 1 or 2, with the folks in the village. And breakfast we sort of take in our room, but we meet and we have a little devotional before we go to the site. We have a devotional at the site. And in the evening, once we've had dinner, we either visit with each other, or the first few nights we will go over, just sort of evaluate what happened during the day. What do we need to do differently for tomorrow? So the first few nights there's not a lot of sightseeing kind of thing. Right. But after we get through the wrinkles, the place where we're staying, which is Felipe Carrillo Porto, is a very charming colonial city, and it has a lot to offer for visiting.
Now, off the top of your head, or maybe you've got it in your hands there, do you have the website for Living Waters?
It's livingwatersfortheworld.org. And I would just read this to you. I should have it memorized. I don't. But Living Waters for the World empowers everyday people to change lives through clean water. We train, equip, support volunteers in forming global clean water mission partnerships. These mission partnerships empower international communities to install and sustain water purification systems and health education programs that transform lives.
So if people want to find out more information, they can go to that website.
Yes.
And they can also find out in that website about this particular project.
Yes, everything is there. One of the categories is volunteer. Just click on volunteer.
Great. Thank you so much. This is fascinating, and I look forward to hearing more about it as the project continues. Our guest today on Encounter has been Joanne Tunison, and we've been talking about Living Waters for the World and a project in Mexico. And again, for more information, go to livingwatersfortheworld.org. I'm Jeff Kellam. Thank you for being with us on the Encounter program, produced in cooperation with the Broome County Council of Churches and WBNG-TV. We thank them for the airtime. I serve as the Parish Associate at Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott in the Union District. And I hope that you'll join us again next week on Encounter. In the meantime, please be gentle with people and with yourself.